If you've done the inner work, therapy, spiritual practices, years of self-development, but you still feel like you're managing your life rather than authoring it, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about the missing stage of human development that nobody seems to talk about, the shift from self-management to self-mastery. And here's what I mean. You can regulate your emotions, you've healed your trauma, maybe you meditate, journal, you do the inner work, you are functional, maybe even thriving by conventional standards. But there's still this exhausting sense that you're holding yourself together, that you're managing the system, not running it. It can look like this. Maybe you know what's true, but you wait for external confirmation before you act. Or you have moments of pure clarity and then abandon your own corner the moment things get real. We've been offered only two paths to wholeness: therapy and spirituality. Therapy helps you manage the system you have, and spirituality teaches you to transcend it. But there's a third path that most people never encounter, and that's mastery, learning to operate your human system with precision and self-authority. This isn't about being perfect or enlightened. It's about completing your natural developmental arc, moving your center of authority from outside yourself to inside, becoming a true adult, not just a highly functioning person in permanent self-management mode. If you're tired of outsourcing permission or abandoning yourself when it matters most, what you're sensing is the call to self-mastery. Today, I'm breaking down exactly what that stage looks like, why most people never reach it, and how to start crossing that threshold yourself. Because here's what's at stake. You can spend the rest of your life managing yourself, or you can learn to actually run your own system. So you can manage your life indefinitely. You can keep it tidy, functional, emotionally stable, and that's what most of us do. It looks like success. It even feels like progress. But here's the thing, managing yourself was never the destination. It's the holding pattern before real adulthood begins. And the next stage isn't some kind of peak achievement. It's simply learning to run your human system the way it was designed, clearly, responsively, and with self-direction. And in a sane world, that would be ordinary, but that stage has quietly disappeared from our cultural map. We talk about healing and awakening, about productivity and performance, but rarely about mastery, the quiet competence of a mind, body, and energy system working together under one coherent authority. And here's where most people stall. You get stable, you get capable, but something in you knows that there's something more. Some unclaimed level of evolution waiting to be lived. And that's the real question, isn't it? Once you can hold things together, once you're functioning, what's left to grow into? That question marks the frontier of maturity. What comes after stability? That innate desire to grow doesn't disappear, it just runs out of road. Once stability is achieved, the horizon doesn't widen, it narrows. We're only offered two serious paths to becoming whole: therapy and spirituality. And each has its place. Each holds a different kind of wisdom, but neither leads to mastery. So when you get to the point where you're reaching for wholeness, you'll find yourself relegated to the modern priesthoods of healing or awakening. But here's what you may not know. There are three paths, not two. Therapy helps you manage the system you have, spirituality teaches you to transcend it, and mastery teaches you how to run it on your own terms. Therapy stabilizes the existing structure. Spirituality tries to dissolve it, and because these are the only sanctioned options, most people spend their lives alternating between managing their distress and trying to transcend it. And we call this balance, but it can easily become an endless loop. Therapy at its best steadies you. It helps you re-inhabit your own story with more kindness and perspective. And when you genuinely need repair, that's exactly what you should seek. But once the structure is sound, if what's stirring underneath isn't pain, but the pressure to evolve, therapy will start to feel like an endless renovation project. You'll keep patching the same walls because no one told you there's another kind of work entirely, the work of building new architecture. Spirituality answers a different impulse, the desire to experience what lies behind the confines of the ego-focused human life. And it's a noble calling, rooted in your intuition that there is something vast and luminous beyond the self. But the modern spiritual landscape often tangles that impulse with a quieter, more practical ache, the exhaustion and bewilderment of being human without self-mastery. You can get trapped chasing spiritual transcendence when what you're really missing is coherence. Each of these paths serves the purpose it was built for, but if you enter them seeking something they can't give, command over your own system, you'll end up in a maze without an exit. What we haven't been offered is the third path, learning to command the human system directly, to show up for life not as a patient or a devotee, but as the author. That missing discipline, learning how thought, emotion, and energy operate as one integrated mechanism, is what I mean by self-mastery. It's not an alternative to healing or transcendence, it's a separate axis altogether. For those who recognize that maintenance and transcendence are not the same as authorship, that axis begins in a different place entirely. To even approach self-mastery, we have to trace where authority first entered the system and how it never quite made its way home. You begin life with authority outside yourself. That's appropriate. You look to parents, teachers, rules, gods, someone else to name reality and grant permission. The problem isn't that children anchor their authority outside themselves. It's that most people never consciously move it inside. They grow up, they get degrees, run teams, raise kids, and still source permission from elsewhere, not openly, but respectably, wrapped in a polished, cosmetic adulthood that looks entirely convincing while covering an internal structure that never built its own center of gravity. So what does that look like from the inside? It can look like saying yes to what you don't have energy for because refusal feels unsafe. It can look like postponing decisions until some invisible authority grants the all clear. It can look like mistaking emotional over-responsibility for empathy and carrying what was never yours to carry. You're functional, you look like you're in charge of yourself, but something in you waits. It waits to be allowed, endorsed, or excused. Your life runs smoothly, yet the signal underneath is faint. That faint signal is your own authority, still being filtered through translators you never chose. And without an internal center of gravity, you'll find that certain patterns repeat. Perhaps you gather second opinions, not just casually, but as a habit. You gather perspectives until the urgency drains out of your original perception. In therapy, this looks like cycling insights. In spirituality, like seeking confirmation from teachers, scriptures, tarot cards, synchronicities. Looking for confirmation isn't wrong, but it can become sanctioned procrastination when your own signal never becomes primary. Then there's the way you build boundaries, not from within, but by borrowing. You adopt other people's standards of what's acceptable or kind, then wonder why your agreements always feel slightly off. This is a drain on the system because the body knows when consent is outsourced. You've also learned to regulate. You stay calm in the moment, say the right thing, even feel proud of your composure, but afterward, you're drained. Regulation without authorship is expensive. It stabilizes the surface while the current underneath still runs on someone else's map. And you're still not sure what's yours. You feel responsible for things that don't originate with you. You absorb other people's discomfort like it's your moral duty. You can call it empathy, call it sensitivity, but underneath, it's a confusion of ownership. You haven't been taught to tell the difference. You may have even been taught it's not nice to try to. How about this? You might be hyper-competent with low conviction. What does this look like? Well, you're competent, exceptionally so, just not when the initiative starts with you. You can execute flawlessly if someone else names the goal. But when it's time to move on your own idea, everything stalls. Not because you lack skill, but because you've never learned how to issue your own permission. And here's a common symptom. You have moments of pure clarity, undeniable, uncompromised knowing. But the moment you start explaining it to yourself, it fades. You run through reassurance rituals before acting. Is this reasonable? But have you asked yourself, reasonable by whose standards? You're composing your life for a room full of silent judges that don't exist. Living this way doesn't make you defective, it just keeps you slightly off center. Perceptive but hesitant, capable but tired, relationally generous, but internally underfed. Over time, that imbalance accrues as subtle dissonance, a reliable career that no longer feels meaningful, relationships that thrive on caretaking rather than contact, and the habit of abandoning your own corner the moment things get real. You've built an impressive life around a missing axis. Moving the center of authority isn't about bravado or teenage rebellion. It isn't proclaiming, I don't need anyone. It's the opposite. I can listen to any valuable source and then decide from the inside. Advice becomes input, not permission. Devotion is offered without surrendering the keys. And momentum returns because you stop sputtering it out in rationalization. So what changes after you make the shift? Well, the shift isn't dramatic, but the effects are, especially once your system realizes it's finally got a pilot. Decisions compress. You spend less energy justifying and more energy doing. Boundaries stop being rules and become reflexes, unforced, accurate, durable. Emotional steadiness arrives not because you throttled your feelings, but because your system recognizes the pilot and stops testing the cockpit. You can still seek counsel, you simply stop outsourcing the final word. If you want a test, try this. Take a current question and remove every imagined observer from the room. The therapist, the audience, the parent, the teacher, the lineage, the algorithm, even the future self you're performing for. What remains? Can you act from that without waiting for a nod from the gallery? That moment, the one where perception converts directly into motion, that's the hinge. You were born into a preloaded system. Parents, culture, education, they each wrote a line of code into how you see and respond. Childhood requires borrowed maps. The trouble is, most people never take the wheel. They live running the same operating system with small updates, but the core program remains untouched. This is the part of you that still waits for praise to confirm worth, that organizes effort around approval, that predicts what will make you safe or right. Even when you've outgrown the circumstances, the code keeps running. The shift to mastery happens line by line. Every time you choose what is true over what is familiar, you alter that script. And eventually you stop asking, who taught me this? And start asking, do I still want it to run? And that's true adulthood, not age, not independence, but ownership. From here, self-management stops being a lifelong occupation and becomes background maintenance. The foreground turns to something else entirely, learning to operate the system with precision. Mastery begins when you stop outsourcing permission, when you develop radical self-honesty and become someone you can trust. This is true adulthood, and it's ordinary. We tend to treat mastery as a peak achievement, not a stage of maturation, something reserved for the chosen and gifted, rather than the natural outcome of a system that's grown into itself. But mastery isn't special. It's simply underdeveloped. It's what happens when a person completes their natural maturation arc, when the mechanisms of thought, emotion, and energy begin to operate under the steady command of an integrated self. And in a sane world, that would be called ordinary adulthood. The fact that it now feels exceptional only shows how much our systems divert us from that trajectory. From birth, we're shaped for compliance, consumption, and constant stimulation, conditions that keep attention scattered and development arrested. The push away from our natural design isn't random. It's built into the culture that profits from our diffusion. So when someone begins to move toward mastery, toward internal coherence and self-authorship, it can look unusual, even radical, but it's not. It's simply what happens when you stop being run by the noise and start using the full range of your own faculties. Most of us stop at self-management. Management is the stage where you learn to regulate, to function, to navigate the world with relative steadiness, and it's valuable. It's necessary, but it's still an intermediary phase, a stabilizing bridge between the dependency of childhood and the self-direction of true adulthood. You can think of it like this. Management keeps you balanced. Mastery makes you effective. Management focuses on control, whereas mastery operates through clarity. Management relies on practiced skill, and mastery arises from direct understanding. When the system is managed, you are careful. When it's mastered, you are exact. Not quiet, not still, just proportionate to the moment. There's no wasted effort, no compensating gesture. And this isn't metaphysical, it's mechanical in the most elegant sense. Your attention, emotion, and action are engines that move together, aligned with the reality in front of you. And that alignment gives rise to what we call presence. Not because you're spiritually elevated, but because nothing in you is lagging behind or racing ahead. It's the feeling of life being lived at the same speed it's happening. To reach this state isn't to become perfect or enlightened. It's to grow into the adult form of awareness, one that can hold complexity without collapse, act without splitting against itself, and recover naturally without elaborate repair rituals. We were meant to reach this stage as a matter of course, just as children naturally progress from crawling to walking and speaking. Mastery is simply the next developmental stride in adulthood, a human being operating as designed. To be self-mastered is not to be above human life, it's to inhabit it fully and with choice, to act without draining your energy in the process, and to live without the constant oppressive supervision of your synthetic mind. When people encounter this level of integration, they often describe it as peace or flow or grace. And those are just the sensations of friction leaving the system. Nothing supernatural, just reality functioning without resistance. If mastery is natural, why do so few people reach it? Because what's natural isn't the same as what's supported. From the moment you enter the world, you're met by systems that reward dependence. Dependence on experts, on belief systems, on external validation, on inherited frameworks of reality. The collective machinery needs compliant participants, not autonomous operators. You were never meant to malfunction, but you were certainly meant to be manageable. So the first obstacle then isn't personal, it's environmental. You're surrounded by incentives to remain externally oriented. Everything from social media to self-improvement culture keeps your attention fragmented and your authority outsourced. The world runs smoother when you're slightly uncertain of yourself. But culture only amplifies what already exists internally. The deeper obstacles are quieter and more intimate. And I'm talking about the familiar gravity of conditioning. Much of what drives you is legacy programming, childhood adaptations that once kept you safe. You learned how to read the room, to manage other people's emotions, to please, to disappear, or to excel in very specific ways. These strategies worked, so they stayed. Even now, when you know better, that conditioning has its own momentum. It insists on keeping the long-established balance. You'll find that the move toward mastery often starts with friction, moments when your insight outpaces your conditioning, and the two collide. You recognize that you're operating below your own understanding, but you can't yet sustain the new level. It's disorienting, and the temptation is to retreat back into what feels familiar. And when people talk about resistance, they often mean laziness or fear. And in truth, resistance is the psyche protecting its existing order. Your system isn't sabotaging you, it's defending the map of reality that feels safe. And that defense can look sophisticated: intellectualization, overanalysis, spiritual bypass, relentless productivity. Each one says, let's stay busy near the truth, but not in it. Resistance isn't only mental either. It takes over the body. Fatigue at the exact moment something demands energy. Sudden boredom when clarity approaches. Irritation toward the person or practice that threatens your equilibrium. The more evolved you are, the more elegant your resistance becomes. And mastery often begins where self-improvement ends. You stop trying to upgrade the old map and start noticing who keeps clinging to it. The work isn't to fight resistance, but to recognize its purpose. It's the part of you that believes safety lies in sameness. And when you see that clearly, resistance loses its moral weight. It becomes information, a signal that you're approaching the edge of an old reality. And every time you choose contact with the truth instead of orbiting it, the map updates itself. And that's how transformation becomes mechanical rather than miraculous. Another sneaky obstacle that keeps you from the project of self-mastery is the comfort of proxy growth. Just look around you. Your life offers endless ways to simulate progress. You can learn, consume, analyze, and discuss without ever actually altering your state. Books, podcasts, retreats, information becomes an identity. The mind collects understanding as if that were transformation. Therapy and spirituality, when approached without discernment, can become part of this loop. They keep you moving, but in a circle. The shift to mastery is different. The focus isn't accumulating new information, it's about conversion, from knowing to doing, from observing to operating. And that's why it feels more like gravity than inspiration, because you have to move your weight. That sounds exciting, and I hear you say, Amara, I'm ready to move my weight. But are you? Because deep down, we harbor a secret fear of true autonomy. Autonomy sounds noble in theory. I mean, who doesn't want agency, self-trust, and independence? But in practice, it can feel like freefall. The moment you begin to hold your own authority, every structure that once defined safety starts to destabilize. You realize how many of your choices were co-signed by someone else's belief system, a partner, a teacher, a tradition, a collective mood. And when that scaffolding dissolves, even wise decisions can feel dangerously unsupported. The fear of autonomy is really a fear of isolation. It's the cold panic that sets in when there's no higher court to appeal to. No external validator to absorb the blame if something goes wrong. So you reflexively reach for consensus. You disguise obedience as humility or create new systems of dependence dressed up as community. And this is why autonomy must be cultivated gradually, not declared. You don't rip away your old sources of validation. You learn to metabolize them, to take back the functions you once outsourced: discernment, reassurance, permission. You learn to be the one who says, this is accurate, this is enough, this is mine. Autonomy changes your relationship to everything around you. Once your internal authority stabilizes, you begin to see how much of ordinary life depends on its absence. The moment you stop seeking permission, you start noticing how many systems are built on gatekeeping it. Your independence quietly exposes the collective dependence that passes for normal. And that's when a different kind of resistance appears, not from within, but from the environment itself. You're no longer at odds with your own conditioning, but with the collective one. The moment your internal gravity shifts, the world around you feels it and tries in subtle ways, well, sometimes in very explicit ways, to correct you. People are used to the version of you that self-manages, not the one that commands. Your new clarity disrupts familiar equations. You'll be asked, sometimes gently and sometimes not, to shrink back to your previous size. It rarely looks hostile. It looks like concern, friends checking that you're okay, colleagues reminding you to be realistic, family calling you different. These are social reflexes, not conspiracies. Systems regulate themselves through pressure. When one part changes frequency, the rest moves reflexively to try to restore the old equilibrium. You begin to see this everywhere, in institutions that reward conformity while preaching innovation, in movements that valorize awakening but punish genuine autonomy. The collective runs on familiarity, and mastery violates that code. So this is where you might stop, not because you're weak, but because of fatigue. You've outgrown your previous reality but haven't yet built the new one, and you're standing between worlds, uncertain how to breathe this thinner air. The truth is that mastery isn't obstructed by a single force, it's obstructed by density, the heaviness of consensus reality, the inertia of the familiar. But every layer of that density is held in place by the same illusion that something outside you still has more authority than what you directly perceive. The moment you stop granting that illusion power, everything lightens. The friction doesn't vanish, it becomes useful information. What used to feel like opposition reveals itself as calibration. The world begins to rearrange around the weight of your coherence. That's the true passage from self-management to self-mastery. Not escape from the collective, but freedom within it. The ability to move cleanly through a world that may never understand you, and yet still benefits from your true adult presence. The more you stabilize in this clarity, the less you need the world to agree. The environment doesn't have to change for you to move freely within it. You start noticing that the real transformation isn't about escaping the collective at all. It's about no longer running on its code. Every system around you, social, cultural, familial, was designed to imprint its version of reality onto your own. That's how the factory settings were installed in the first place. The work ahead isn't to defy those systems, but to reclaim authorship of the one you actually live in, the human vehicle itself. You didn't choose the system you were born into, but there comes a point where you either keep running on factory settings or you step into full authorship. Most people think of mastery as extreme control, but the opposite is true. Control belongs to management. It's how you keep things from falling apart. Precision belongs to mastery. It's how you let things work as they were designed to. When you live in management mode, you monitor everything and compare it to inherited frameworks of productivity, morality, identity. It can be a useful discipline, one that keeps you stable and functional. But management can easily morph into a kind of self-surveillance disguised as introspection and growth. You stay balanced by constant self-evaluation and adjustment, like someone holding a tray of water through a crowded room. It works, you spill less, but it's tiring. Mastery operates on a different principle. It doesn't manage the parts, it understands the whole. It's less about control and more about contact. The next phase isn't about discovering something new. It's about using what you already have effectively. When you're managing yourself, you're trying to stay balanced. And when you're mastering yourself, you're learning to use balance as an instrument. Mastery feels calm without being subdued. The system isn't tense because it's not overcompensating. You can be passionate, forceful, even chaotic, but there's a through line. The energy that once leaked into endless internal critique, friction, and self-adjustment now returns to circulation. What used to be self-correction becomes forward motion. You may not be aware of just how much energy and effort it takes to compensate for distortion, overthinking, over-explaining, overworking. When your perception is precise, action becomes simple because it's rooted in direct contact with what's true. To live this way is an act of fidelity to reality, to your own signal, to what actually exists in front of you, instead of what you fear or hope it to be. And this is the overlooked beauty of mastery. It's not dramatic, it's not saintly, it's efficient. And I know it's hard to spin that into an exciting selling point, but it's a big deal. That efficiency is quietly life-changing. The system does what it was designed to do, and your energy is freed up for living and effortless evolution instead of maintenance. So what will life look like when you cross into mastery? Well, don't expect a cinematic moment. It's quieter than that. One day you notice the background hum of self-management has gone still. You're not watching yourself live. You're simply living. The system isn't tense because it's not overcompensating. Clarity stabilizes. Your emotional landscape reorganizes. You no longer serve as an auxiliary processor for everyone else's emotions or look to them to metabolize your own. And the most striking change is the absence of inner supervision. That voice that once offered constant commentary, measuring, predicting reactions, second-guessing, or criticizing your moves, narrating everything, finally subsides. It's not suppressed, just unnecessary. Imagine a reality in which your synthetic mind trusts you and defers to you. This may sound like some idealized perfect self, but it's not perfection at all. You're still going to make mistakes, plenty of them, but they resolve quickly because nothing in you fights the feedback. You still feel pain, but it moves through. You still experience uncertainty, but it no longer unseats you. The difference is coherence. The system responds as one. You don't have to gather yourself before you act. You already exist within your own gravity. That's what crossing the threshold looks like. Not transcendence, not control, but the ease of reality functioning without excess friction. When your system begins to run this efficiently, you start to notice how rare it is in the world around you. You really notice the static in conversations, in institutions, in the collective nervous system. So much brilliance endlessly misdirected by the absence of self-command. It becomes obvious that what we call maturity is often only management scaled up, organized dysfunction, well-dressed confusion. You see how much of society depends on people remaining half-formed. And crossing that threshold isn't just personal. It changes what you can perceive, what you can build, and what you will no longer participate in. And in that moment, something very simple becomes clear. The world doesn't need more perfectionists or people who excel at self-management. It needs more true adults. Look around you and you can feel it. An entire civilization built to function without true adults. Systems running on borrowed conviction, institutions substituting public image for leadership, endless noise, expertly managed, producing almost nothing of consequence. The problem isn't intelligence or technology. We have both in excess. The problem is orientation. The collective center of authority has never moved inward. We've built a world where nearly everyone is managing anxiety, image, identity. We keep the machinery humming, but few people are truly at the controls. Imagine a world built of true adults. Fewer grand but meaningless gestures, more honest execution, less outrage, more repair, but no one is coming to do that for you. The role is vacant. You have to take that role yourself. It's what stabilizes every system you touch. You become the point of coherence reality can organize around. And this is what mastery looks like at scale. People who no longer drain life trying to prove they matter, but rather use that energy to build, repair, and live from an undistorted blueprint of self. You were never meant to spend your life managing yourself. That was the apprenticeship. The work that follows is simple: to be undivided in motion, fully present, and faithful to what's real. And this isn't transcendence, it's adulthood fulfilled. What we've been talking about today isn't theory, it's the beginning of practice. If you're done managing yourself and ready to learn how to run your system cleanly, you'll find the map and the mentorship inside my courses. This work is for when you're ready to make clarity a baseline, not a breakthrough. And you'll find them and much more at amarastrand.com. As always, thank you for spending this time with me today, and I'll talk to you again soon.